Hans, please take a seat. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I think let's start. If you don't know me, my name is Perumal Nithiyarasu. I am the chair of the Sienkiewicz Lecture Committee. My job is just to quickly introduce the lecture and pass it on to Helen to introduce the speaker. So let me first welcome you all on behalf of Sienkiewicz Lecture Committee, Swansea University and Faculty of Science and Engineering, including the audience in person here as well as online. Those who are not familiar with this lecture, just very briefly, this lecture was established by Swansea University in 2017 to honor Professor Oleg Sienkiewicz, a renowned civil engineer and a finite element expert, I think widely known as a father of the finite element method. The first inaugural lecture, actually it was in this hall, was delivered by Dame Anne Dowling, and the last one, the 7th lecture, was delivered by Lord Dorsey. Today's lecture will be delivered by a well-known AI expert, as well as an outstanding role model for women. Before I will ask Professor Helen Griffiths to formally introduce our today's speaker, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank a few people. First one is Professor Howell Thomas, who is president of the Learned Society of Wales, who will be chairing the question and answer session. Professor Hans Siens, who will conclude today's lecture, who is the Deputy Executive Dean as well as Deputy PVC. Normally, our Vice Chancellor turns up to almost all events. Unfortunately, today he sent his apologies. I would also like to very briefly acknowledge the financial support received from South Wales Institution of Engineers Education Trust. I think John Tucker is somewhere. Yeah, there you are, the representative from the institute. I also would like to acknowledge Learned Society of Wales for their financial contribution. Finally, I would like to acknowledge the help I received from Sam Board. I think we are all here today because of Sam. She more or less single-handedly looks after this event. Now I would like to invite Professor Helen Griffiths, Pro Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation and Impact, Swansea University, to introduce the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Arasu. I am on, aren't I? Yes, good. And a very warm welcome to you all. And of course, to our distinguished speaker today, Dame Wendy Hall, thank you for coming. We're delighted that you're here in Swansea, and I appreciate that it's not your first time, so we're going to hear a little bit about that, I think, as you share your insights. But what we really are keen to hear about is your insights and expertise and what is one of the truly exciting opportunities, I think, that faces us at the moment around AI. And it's not without its challenges, so no doubt we'll hear some more about that from you. But before I hand over to Wendy for her lecture, I'd just like to say a few words on our guest. So Wendy is currently Regius Professor of Computer Science and Associate Vice President for International Engagement and the Director of the Web Science Institute at the University of Southampton. One of the first computer scientists to undertake serious research in multimedia and hypermedia, she's been at the forefront of this field ever since. The influence of her work has been significant in many areas, including digital libraries, the development of the internet, and the emerging research discipline of web science. Her current research includes exploring interfaces between the social and physical sciences through the development of web science and the study of online systems through socio-technical lens. Her latest book, For Internets, co-written with Kieran O'Hara and published by OUP in 2021, is about data, geopolitics, and the governance of cyberspace. She became a Dame Commander of the British Empire in 2009, UK New Year's Honours List, and was elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society in the same year. She also acts as an advisor to the UK government and many other governments and companies around the world. And in 2023 was appointed to the United Nations High-Level Advisory Body on Artificial Intelligence. So you can all see a very impressive CV. It's a great privilege for us that Wendy will be delivering this year's Zinkovich lecture entitled The Geopolitics of the Internet and Its Implications for the Governance of AI. Welcome and croeso, Wendy. Thank you.
I did consultancy for the National Grid about electricity distribution, and it was we were producing on the BBC Micro software simulations for schools. This is how I started in computing, about how electricity was distributed, and about how, you know, everyone put the cup of tea on at half time in the football and things. The surge of demand for electricity meant different power stations were switched on, and what happened if there was a power cut. And lo and behold, here we were. We came all the way to Swansea to give a talk with our BBC Micros. We didn't. In those days, do you remember those days? You couldn't give talks on computers because there was no internet and all that. You had 35mm slides. We used to take pictures of the screen and use those. Anyway, we came to Swansea with our 35mm slides, started telling this story, and lo and behold, there was a snowstorm and the power went off. Honestly, I kid you not. It's one of those amazing coincidences, and there's something about the freak type of snow that fell, froze the wires, and they collapsed, and the power. And that was not this. This is a new campus, isn't it? I've never been here before. I used to come to the old campus. I had quite a lot of collaboration with Swansea over the years. So it's lovely to be back. I used to come here as a student as well. I used to go out with the captain of the surf club at Southampton. And he used to come to the Gower Peninsula every year, and we used to sleep on the beach. I think Morgan's Hotel will be much nicer tonight. Did you know there's a Nouveau Beaujolais convention in town tomorrow?
We arranged it for you.
Did you? Well, there you are. I want Nouveau Beaujolais on dinner tonight. Got that challenge? Who's taking me to dinner? Are you coming, Matt? Right. Okay, so let's get on with the lecture. Okay, so here we are. Sounds a grand title. I think I'll just go into. I tell stories. That's how I do my lectures these days. And I mean, I'm not. I could talk, of course. Another talk I could give was how the web grew. You know, that's how I used to give lots of talks about from 1989 onwards. And people always not here, but a lot of people introduced me as someone who helped invent the internet. Well, of course I didn't. That was Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn in the 1970s. I'm not that old. But I was working with Tim at the very beginning of the World Wide Web. And I'll talk a bit about things that have happened with the web all the way through. And there's a lot in the book about this. But I want to get onto the AI stories. And so I just want to talk about the fact that we have no governance for the internet. All right? The internet was an experiment. I'm going to talk a bit about that in a minute. But the web was it was a live experiment. And we couldn't, you know, after 20 years say, well, we don't like that. Let's start again and do it properly or do it better. Or we have to, and look what's happened, right, with all the problem of online harms and social media and all the challenges we've got to fix the web, which is what Tim's trying to do all the time. And then with AI, we're doing another online experiment, a live experiment, not online, live experiment with the world. That really there's no going back from these experiments. It's not like when you do Peter Carr was on, the Secretary of State was on television this morning saying, I'm going to put more teeth into the Online Safety Act. And he spoke very well about what he was going to do. But we can't sort of roll back the years. And, the harm's been done. A lot of we have to work out, and this industry, the computing industry, is the only industry I'm aware of, and he said the same this morning on television, that can release things that are unproven, untested, maybe unethical. They just release stuff, don't they? We're all used to operating systems that don't work. They have bugs. It's one of the sort of great achievements of computer science is you produce stuff with bugs. And then people test it. The society tests it. And no other industry would let that happen. And we have to really think hard about if we're going to change things for AI. So, having said that, I'm going to start the story at where we are effectively today. We wrote this book in 2020, 2021. But, when people talk about this, Eric Schmidt from Google, people talk about, we've got the US and the China basically run the internet, and we're effectively having a splinternet. And our book makes the point that we think it's more nuanced than that. It's not just a US-China binary. There are lots of different cultures that have impacted, geopolitical cultures that have impacted on the growth of the internet, and that's what I want to explore you to do today. The internet is a network of networks. It works on the network effect. So it's unlikely to just schism, and there's too many dependencies. But we are evolving what we talk about four internets, and I'll explain that story and then show you how that's also transpiring with AI. So in the beginning, with the web, there was one website. In the beginning with the internet, there was a network, beginning to be networks of computers, and there were women. I'm a bit disappointed with not so many women in the audience here today. Where are your female PhD students? Why haven't they come to see a role model? Anyway, but that's another story. We've got to talk about that later. But there were, as we all know, there were women in this world before the culture hit. And, we all know that the internet started out of the defense industry in the US because they wanted something that one bomb wouldn't destroy the whole network. And there were, of course, at the beginning, all the companies had different standards for exchanging information. So what Bob did was invent TCP/IP. And it was, the whole issue was openness. And I don't know if I've got time to tell you this story, but I will, because I love it. I can't remember the date. We've just celebrated 50th anniversary of the internet, so it must have been 1974. And when they did TCP/IP. And they came up with a standard, of course, quite theoretical, and then they wanted to test it. So they bought a white van, which is now in the car park of the Computer History Museum in San Jose. And they drove it around all the big companies in America that were making computers and doing things on networks. And they'd just walk in through the front door and say, can we talk to your engineers? And they'd say yes, and they went and spoke to the engineers, and they say, can we put our standards, our new protocols onto your machines? And they go, yes. Can you imagine that today? Two strangers walk in through the front door and put their protocols on your machines, right? Wouldn't happen. In those days, of course, it did. And they asked, well, I suppose they asked permission. Then they'd go outside to the van, had an antenna on the roof, and they'd send a message to show people how simple it was. And then that gradually propagated. That is how they got the internet. And it was Peter Kirsten at UCL brought it to the UK. We were one of the first outside of the US, the UK was, to get the internet. Anyway, these are old stories, but I think they're really interesting in the history of computing, John, aren't they? They get lost so easily. Because this is really pioneering stuff that they were doing. And the same is still happening today, in different ways, of course, always in science and engineering. So the openness was an absolute value for the, both in terms, as I said, both in terms of engineering and political and commercial, actually. It was all about, we're going to have, build this thing on it, there would be no, on open, there would be no central editing, it would be decentralized, There would be, you know, the packet. Isn't it amazing how the packets go around and assemble themselves where you want them to be? It's just, I've never got over the amazement of that. Of course, when we go into space, it'll have to be a different protocol because that won't work because of latency. But anyway, net neutrality was a founding argument for the internet as well, and Tim kept that going with the web. The argument that everyone is the same, basically, in terms of the speed. There's no making things quicker or slower because you've got more money. You have to pay it at the end, of course. But the laws on net neutrality in the US have changed, depending on who's lobbying who. But that is still an ambition of the internet world, and open standards, absolutely fundamental to the debate. And the key thing for this whole talk was that there was no interference with the packets, the content. Right? That was Now, there's a certain country in the world where that doesn't hold true. Well, not necessarily. Actually, that's not true. They don't interfere with on the internet, but they do interfere with the content in China. Look at it. But we, of course, in the West, value freedom of speech very highly. And actually, we pay the price for that. Because it's really, really hard for us then to say who controls the content on the internet. In an authoritarian state, that's a lot easier decision to make. And I'm not saying I want to live in an authoritarian state. I'm just trying to say there must be ways. And I saw Peter Carl this morning, who's a man I have great respect for. He's the new Labour Secretary of State for Technology, saying we are really going to try and tackle this. And it's very, very hard. Come back to that. So this is our internet number one. Our foundational internet is the open internet of Silicon Valley. Of course, there's another thing in history about why companies are all these companies are all founded in Silicon Valley. It's all to do with the weather and the fact that Steve Jobs used to walk up and down the high street between the coffee houses, what do you call them, coffee shops. You know, I've met lots of politicians who said, well, why don't we get a Google in the UK? We haven't got the scale. We maybe could have done something in Europe, but they've gone a different way. So we'll never get that sort of scale, but we have to learn to work with them. So they had the first mover advantage. They had developed the technical solutions. So it started as a technical solution to things, not socio-technical. I've talked about the protocols, talked about that. Key thing, interoperability. And another thing that we learned from this world was let's innovate by moving fast and breaking things and then fixing it. And that's what's happening in the AI world too. And I worry that it's a bit too dangerous for that. But we've built up this culture of the technology companies and the internet, and they are the ones that are developing the AI. So we'll come back to that as we go through the story. Because awaiting harms, learn and revise is maybe not something you can do once the internet's once AI is more intelligent than us, if we ever get there. So we talk about this a lot in the book, some of the characteristics of openness which give us, who value the openness, real problems. I've talked about the fact that nobody looks at the data, so it's very easy for people to put out fake news, because no one's checking. I mean, now we're asking the companies to check. They've got to try and get the pornography off, the child abuse, how to make a bomb, all these, and who decides? I mean, this is the big ethical problem from our society. Who decides what content should be allowed on the internet and what isn't? It's a really hard one for us who value the freedom to say what we want, to have our own truths about things, and to be able to challenge your truth about something. Who is going to decide? Our government? Do we want them to be the censors? The companies? Do we want Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk to be the censors? Or Donald Trump? And we must remember this is live. So, and then there's, us as a society. The fact that we hide behind anonymity, which is something the civil rights groups will. So we must have anonymity on the internet because of the people who live in countries where governments use what people say on the internet to put them in jail. Well, of course, we've done that recently. So we are sort of going that way under this new government. I'm not saying that's all wrong. I think maybe they acted a bit fast and a bit, you know, the same week they let prisoners out of jail, they put people in for one tweet with no previous convictions. I've found that quite hard to do. But we do need to put more teeth onto it. We need to make these crimes on social media stick. But these are really, really difficult decisions for us as a society to make about where the censorship, where the responsibility lies for telling the truth. I'll come back to that later because, of course, my truth is not always the same as your truth. Yeah, so why do people feel they can, because they can be anonymous on the internet, they can do what the hell they like? Why has that culture grown up? We wouldn't do it in real life. I'm not going to come up to Sam and swear at her and tell her she's the most awful person in the world, am I? Did I do that when I met you? No. I wouldn't, of course we wouldn't do it in real life. Would we? Most of us are quite civil about this stuff. But we do it, people, not us I'm saying, but people do it all the time online. Because they feel they can. Why? Why is that grown up as a thing people feel they can do? And then there's the fact that it was made, everything was interoperable has led to all the issues about security and malware that we have to deal with retrospectively, really important. The whole cybersecurity industry has grown up around this, really important. And Tim will always say things like, well, if I'd known people were going to do these awful things with the World Wide Web, I'd have put more security into the protocols that because they're just plain sharing, links to documents protocols. And one has to ask the question, if he'd done that, and we can't rerun the experiment, but if he'd done that, would people have used it so quickly if it had been harder to get onto in the first place? We can't rerun the experiment, so we can't really know. Anyway, let's move on. So I've said there are 4 internets, and I've told you about one. And we argue in the book but there are in addition 4 ethical responses. Well, 1 + 4 is 5. Why don't we say there's 5 internets? That's what I'm going to tell you now. So if I had more time, I'd say, what do you think they are? But let's just go through them. We talk about the European or bourgeois response, which is all about protecting privacy, protecting people's rights online, civility, respect. Of course, one of the reasons for that is none of the companies are in Europe. So what control do we have over them? Then there's in the book we call it the paternal response because we wanted to sell copies in China. In the paper we wrote before the book, we called it the authoritarian response. It's where you've got a lot of top-down control, more censorship, using the internet to impose social values, and therefore, catch criminals, but also catch the people who don't agree with what you want them to do. And then there's the commercial response, which is the main in America, where it's all market force-led, because that's where the companies are, and they lobby the East Coast. The companies on the West Coast lobby the government on the East Coast to get the rules and regulations, the laws that help them make more money, because that gives more tax. And basically that's the only place in the world where this can happen. And then you've got the same happening in China, but there's less lobbying of the government goes on there, I guess. And the government is more in control of what's happening. But so where's the 4 internets that we talk about in the book? We talk about them as we talk about positive visions, and no one culture it's not discrete, right? These things overlap, because clearly we can see here in Europe, in our type of internet, we do want to stop social harms, and so we're having to bring in some authoritarian control of things, whoever does it. And there's lots of ways that China, for example, has used the internet for the good, to help people to really grow the company, help people to get online and use it for innovation. So it's not all bad, and it's not bad versus good in that sense. And there are lots of others. We give examples in the book of, you could think about other types of internets that you might want to describe. But these are the four that the main four that we talk about. So I've already covered most of this. We call it the Brussels. Well, this is my co-author Kieran. I love the way he writes, and he talks about the Brussels bourgeois internet, protecting people's privacy and dignity, human rights. They brought in GDPR as a part of that, and so anyone who trades with the EU, and we still have GDPR in the UK despite Brexit, has to abide by their rules, and they try and find people, and it just gets stuck in the courts forever. But that, good for them for trying. But and then they're doing the same with the AI, of course, with their AI Act, and we try and think about harms that might happen and neutralise them before they happen. In Beijing, it's a much more top-down approach. It's about stopping revolution. Everything about China is about keeping the control of the dragon. Everything in China is about dragons. Dragon represents power and revolution. So they try and stop people talking about revolutions. That's parcel of what one of their main driving forces. So they want to control conversations online. Chinese companies have to align with the government. Of course, many Western companies have pulled out of China because they won't align with the government in terms of allowing the government to look at the data. Because the other thing we have is that in our world, the government not allowed to look. We're quite happy to give all our data to Google or Facebook or whatever, but we don't want the government to look at it to catch the bad guys. Okay, that's fine, but sometimes our governments do need to look at data. And we have rules about how they can and can't do it. But in China and other authoritarian states, they can look at whatever data they like. And as a result of that, sorry, I've had one of these horrible colds, so as a result of that, they can do experiments we can't do with the autonomous vehicles, for example, because if you can gather data about people in the vehicles, in ways that we can't experiment with, because it's harder for us to get at the data, and also in health too. It's really difficult for us to share health data records because of the quite right protection of privacy and security around them, but it makes it really difficult for us to access that data for AI reasons and so on. And things like face recognition, they were able to pursue this and do it very fast because they didn't have to worry about the privacy issues of what they do with people's faces when they capture all of them. And quite rightly we do, I think, we quite rightly do worry about the privacy issues, but we're still adopting the Chinese technology to help us control crowds, see who's writing, catch the criminals. And we don't actually have any proper laws around this. We have to use existing laws. We haven't really got a strategy on a law around the use of face recognition. It's sort of creeping in to things. And also China has, must be careful about time, China has spread its tentacles for the internet through its Belt and Road Initiative. So it's largely Africa. It's given Africa the internet, if you like. It's introduced the internet, paid for the internet to be introduced into African cultures. So it controls quite a bit of the world. And a lot of those governments are authoritarian in ways. And so there's a whole culture of this authoritarian type paternal internet, which makes it a bigger internet than our one. And then the DC one, very market force led. They negotiate the sort of what they want. They go backwards and forwards. You see it in Congress on net neutrality. Reduce interoperability between sites, and immense innovation in the US, but they're in walled gardens, thank heavens. So Google doesn't have all the information about everybody. It has its information. Facebook has, or Meta has its information. I don't know what OpenAI collects about us, but anyway, probably through Microsoft, it's got a lot of information. But the governments can't access it. So there's some walled garden protection there. So those are our 4 ethical responses. No, sorry, those are 3 of the 4 ethical responses, and here's the 4th. We call it the hacking response, or The Moscow spoiler model is the chapter in the book. I hope I'm getting you to think about reading the book. It's actually quite thick and not an easy read, I wouldn't say, but it's a good one. And this is where they use the internet to effectively to do us down, to either send out fake news or scam us, or it's not just Russia. Lots of other countries do it too, and it's organised crime, serious organised crime, and to put out propaganda, put out bots, all the things you read about in the newspapers all the time. So in the book, we didn't call that a fifth internet because we feel it's more parasitic than actually an internet culture that's emerged for any good reasons. It's really using the power of the internet against itself. As I say, there's there's hardly a Russian monopoly. There's other countries do it. Russia, just before COVID, was trying very hard to pull .ru off the internet so it could have its own intranet, if you like. China's the only country that can actually detach itself from the main internet and still operate, because they got from the get-go the fact that it was a way to control and help the population of China, but all the main nodes of the internet that they need are within China, so they can, and they quite regularly test coming off the internet and seeing how they can still operate with an internal economy. But any other country that tries to come off the internet will live quickly. They have, countries have taken themselves off the internet when there were riots, and Egypt did famously, but they very quickly come back on because their economy just dries up. And we suspect Russia never successfully managed to detach itself because it would be too dependent on other nodes outside Russia. But also, we don't want Russia to detach because it's how we spy on them these days. I can't tell you any more about that than you might read in the newspapers, but they spy on us and we spy on them through the internet. Now, if you think of just in terms of size, if we've got about, I say, when we wrote the book, it was about 60% of the world was on the internet, which is amazing in 30 years since the web. But it's now about 70, 75, I think, isn't it? I don't know, not sure, but there's still plenty to come. Most of the people who aren't on the internet will be in rural China, Africa and India. And the question is, what sort of model are they going to follow? And if you think if it was 100% of the world on the internet today, the world population breaks down as in that table. So we, the free world, are actually quite a small part of this. It really depends how India develops, because if India goes more authoritarian and you add China and India, the influence China has on Africa and the Middle East may be part of that as well. We'd be a tiny part of a free internet compared to other parts of the world, and we're seeing how that's playing out. In the book, we call India the swing state because how that 1.3, 1.4 billion people change and how the government changes. They've done amazing things in India. India's my favourite chapter in the book because the things they've done with Aadhaar, the ID number, and the whole population has access to the internet now, even if they don't have a birth certificate, right? They get on, they can, and they've developed their public infrastructure, digital public infrastructure. They're cutting out, you can pay for things so easily through the internet in India. So even the poorest of traders can go to the market with a QR code, and all I've got to do is put my phone on his or her QR code and pay for the goods he or she's trying to tell me direct from my bank account into his bank account, which he gets at through his Aadhaar number. Or her Aadhaar number. It's quite amazing. But, of course, the government could use that. This is the thing with digital IDs. They could use that to find out information about you. At the moment, the courts in India, the Supreme Court, is holding the law that says the government cannot look at the data that is accessed through the Aadhaar number. And, but the Modi government does have authoritarian inclinations, but at the moment it's holding, and it wouldn't work We couldn't do the digital public infrastructure the way they've done it, but we could look at its best practice in terms of how they have done it, and we could look at how we could use that in terms of keeping us safe by using digital identities, as long as the law holds that you have to keep information that digital identities lead to private. Anyway, I want to get on to AI. I just want to make the point that the internet's never been used in sanctions so far. You know, stopping countries getting onto the internet hasn't been used by sanctions. That's partly because we want to access what they're talking about, but also because ICANN argued when Ukraine asked ICANN to take the internet Russia off the internet as part of the sanctions when they invaded. ICANN refused because they said it would make the internet start to make it too fragile, and it could lead to decay in terms of the way the IP addresses are used and allocated, because you've got to keep the thing running whilst you take one country off, and they argued that it would be too difficult to manage. But then I suppose this might change, of course, with Trump being president, but suppose China invaded Taiwan and the US president said, right, I want to take China off the internet. Would people be able to refuse? We might not get to that, hopefully, but this has never been used in that way. And let's think about that as we go into thinking about AI. So my argument is that AI regulation will follow a similar path. And because it's no coincidence that it's the internet companies that are driving the development of AI as we know it under Gen AI, generative AI, because they have the money, they have the compute power, and they have the data, and they have the ability to do things across the whole internet and to use the whole of the internet to train their models. No one else could do that as quickly as they've been able to. So it really is no coincidence that it is these companies that we have never regulated that are driving the so far unregulated development of AI. And that is a real problem for the world, because the governments of the world have got to think about how we do regulate these companies, because they continue to put out stuff that doesn't work, hasn't been tested, is flawed, and as it gets cleverer and cleverer, what's going to stop them putting out something that could do us real harm? So, because it's not been tested or thought about, unintended consequence. Where do we and how do we bring in the regulation, the laws in the different countries, and how do we think about this globally in the same way as we try and think about climate science? So we are writing the book about this now, and we're talking about the same four cultures: open, the European, the Chinese, or the authoritarian, the sort of market-led. And then I think we are going to talk about 5 AIs in the book, but you'll have to buy that one to find the answer. So I just want to tell you a little bit about my story and how ChatGPT has evolved, and I'm going to run out of time, so I will whiz through it. It's already 20 to 5. What time am I supposed to finish? Yeah, I know. All right, you're being very kind. I was supposed to finish in about 10 minutes. Okay. So I don't know if you said this. I actually got a phone call in February 2017 asking me, 10 Downing Street was Theresa May, asking me, Jerome Pesenti and I, to write a review of how AI could be used to grow the UK economy. Economic growth. Now, there's an expression we're hearing a lot about today. I keep pointing them back to our report. I always thought that Theresa May needed some distraction from Brexit. She did struggle with that, didn't she? But it was just the time the World Economic Forum was talking about Internet 4.0 and basically saying countries that hadn't got AI were going to not die, but lose out. And the rhetoric at the time was AI was going to take all your jobs. So they were thinking about, and I've never signed up to that rhetoric, by the way, and I don't sign up to it today. It will take some jobs, but it will create more. We could talk about that if you want. So, whizzing through, They accepted our report. It's history, I won't go through it, but this was the biggest check. Greg Clark and Matt Hancock, remember him? Signed this off, and it was a £1 billion investment in AI. Biggest check I've ever signed, or been part of signing. And that money has been spent over the last 5 years, and all the things, your DTCs and your hubs and AI hubs and fellowships, all those things came out of that money. So I'm fiercely proud of what we did. And also a lot of money went into innovation, enabling companies to use AI, adopt AI in hopefully productive ways. It's very, these things are slow. It's not an overnight thing in industry that was suddenly, or in the health service or whatever. We have to have strategies and tactics. And then from that sort of time, as we all saw generative AI on the horizon. AI was getting more than just face recognition and speech processing. And the EU started to develop their AI Act. Beijing has its own. It has a very good set of acts around AI safety. The US and the EU was trying to get the US to adopt their law. That was never going to happen, but anyway. And then we had the rise of the large language model. And in May 2020, just at the beginning of COVID, OpenAI, which was going from not-for-profit for profit, Elon Musk, who funded it originally, was kicked out. More of that later. And they released GPT-3 in May 2020, just as we were going into COVID. And China was doing its equivalent. Never forget, China's there too. They're very parallel in terms of development. It's big Wu Dao. And Stephen Hawking, I always think about him and saying, well, if this race to artificial general intelligence, i.e. machines that are more intelligent than us, which is what the companies keep talking about, then we will potentially have machines that will overturn, be the end of the human race. And we're not near it with generative AI, but if that's the vision, then is that where we want to go? And these are the questions that I feel we need to ask. Meanwhile, Sam Altman, who will, I think, go down as, oh no, I won't say that, sorry Sam. Sam Altman with ChatGPT, really, if there's any human-computer interface people here, this was the thing that made the world look at this generative AI, because suddenly you could talk to something that talked back in a natural language, and it sort of seemed to make sense. It doesn't, of course, because it hallucinates all the time, but so everyone, including the politicians, started to play with ChatGPT. We started to, what happens if the students use it to write their essays, and there was all the scaremongering. Elon Musk said, oh, well, I was kicked out of OpenAI, so let's put a pause on all this because I want to start my own company. That didn't work, and the UK was doing its pro-innovation approach to AI regulation, which said let's use existing agencies like Ofcom and the competitive CMA and to manage regulation, but not go into law like the EU had. And people said, nice idea, but how do we control it? This was all going on. This is March 23. And the government, Rishi Sunak, by the way, is Prime Minister by now. He had funded a lot of AI. He funded a lot of he was Chancellor when we got the money for the CDTs and the hubs, and all that went through UKRI under his chancellorship. And they were putting more money in. This was the money it gave to a big computer, then the Labour government took back, but we'll see what happens to that. Innovate UK was putting money into helping companies adopt AI. And then Rishi made out a cheque for £100 million to help the Foundation Model Task Force, because he was beginning to drink the Kool-Aid from the tech bros that told him that there was potentially an existential threat coming here. Meanwhile, Google thought it had an existential threat from OpenAI, and it came out with Bard too soon. That was a failure. But beginning of what they were doing with OpenAI. And Geoffrey Hinton, who's just won the Nobel Prize for Physics for doing his AI work, saying it's all too dangerous, I'm quitting Google. But actually he was probably quitting because he wanted to be able to talk about it. I'm racing through because I haven't got much time left. I've told too many stories. But then we had another letter. This is all only a year ago, right? We had another letter from the Centre for AI Safety in May 23 saying, we've really got to take this very seriously, this stuff. Because the companies keep on going with this rhetoric that they're going to invent software that's cleverer than we are. So what do we do about it? And all the big beasts signed up to this letter, but I don't know what effect it had. In the UK, we kept talking about existential threats. This was the BMJ saying that the AI is going to kill everybody, basically. A risk to the health of millions, because it was going to create drugs that would kill us all. Because why? Why was it going to do that? Even if it could, why would it do that? No virus kills off the people that feed it, so why would it do that? But anyway, this whole existential threat thing came through. Rishi flies to the US and says to Biden, right, we're going to launch an AI safety summit. You will come, won't you? He didn't. He sent Kamala Harris. This was June 23. Meanwhile, his advisor, Matt Clifford, was warning everybody that AI could kill many humans within 2 years. Right? We've already had a year of that. And this AI that we're producing at the moment is as dumb as you could possibly believe. So, and Ian Hogarth was put in charge of that £100 million to set up a foundation model task force. Southampton got 31 million for responsible AI, which we fund lots of people with. That's just a point on the story. Elon Musk launched his own company, XAI, in July 23. What he's done is build one of the world's biggest supercomputers. We're not quite sure what he's going to do with what his USP is going to be in terms of AI. Notice there's not one woman in that list of people there. Biden and Harris then come up with the executive order that says this is how we're going to manage regulation in the US, largely going to be self-regulation. It's like saying to the tobacco companies, why don't you self-regulate? That's a good idea. China's ploughing on with its work and using its Belt and Road initiative to get to everybody it can with AI. The United Nations launches its high-level advisory body. This is all part of trying to get AI to help with the sustainable goal, and what do they call it? Sustainable development goals. And we were given 9 months effectively to produce a report about how to do global government. So having done the UK's AI strategy, I now moved on to the world. And I was very, very privileged to be part of this group. And I just put there that this was one of the first groups that had China involved in the initiative. And I co-chaired the governance working group with my friend Yi Zhang from the Chinese Academy of Sciences. There were 39 of us on this body. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak says we're going to have an AI safety institute in the UK because we're going to work out how to make these foundation models safe, even though they're on the West Coast and we're in Westminster in London. You can ask me more about that. And then just the day before, or the day of, the safety summit in Bletchley Park, as it started, as I said, Biden didn't come, Kamala did, and they announced their executive order that day, just as, it's like the Monty Python foot coming down on the, amazing politics. This is the executive order that Trump will almost certainly overturn. So there won't even be self-regulation in the US. They won't even be asked. My best guess on what Trump will do is he will just say, the US, this is my guess, right? People on the live webcast, it's a guess, that he will just say, the US has got to win this race. I'm going to take all the guardrails off. We win. Very dangerous point for the world, I think. So I get invited to Bletchley Park. It was actually a better summit than I thought it was going to be. Chinese were there, so that was good. I'm whizzing through now. We had the Safety Institute start. Why did I put that up there? I can't remember. Oh, it doesn't matter really. My worry about diversity is that, look at that. Where's the diversity in that? It's all the tech bros talking, the macho competitiveness. And, this overhyped scaremongering, really to bring the business in and make them look better than the guys down the road. I think OpenAI is very overvalued. Will there be a crash? There's all sorts of things could happen in the next week, months, year. Meanwhile, we started producing our report. We did a lot of meetings, consultations. My God, it's 10:02, sorry. I'll just whiz through this slot and then you can ask me some questions. So this was us, this was some of us, there were 39 of us, very diverse group from all around the world, produced this report which went to the Secretary General and was released in September, governing AI for the whole of humanity, not just the rich West. we say in the report there's only 7 countries signed up to most of these AI agreements. And the vast majority of the world, I mean, China's not included in things like G7 and OECD, and most of the world is not part of this discussion. So we're setting ourselves up for a future where we can say we've done very well out of AI, and the rest of the world, you can just wait until we've finished using it and then get the crumbs off of our table and the worst bit of it, because by the time you get to use it, it's all going to be going to hell in a handcart sort of stuff, just like we've done with climate. Anyway, we could talk more about that. There's several things we recommended. Scientific panel, standards exchange, policy dialogue at the highest government level, regulation will happen in nation states, and but we particularly recommended capacity building in the global south. Right, so that went to the United Nations General Assembly and was passed. Our recommendations were passed, which is fantastic, except for the data recommendation, which was here, recommendation, I can't point to, 6 there under common benefits. We recommended a global AI data framework. They couldn't get that through. There's too much debate, and you can't do the AI without the data. So that was too disputed by many countries because they want to make money out of their data or they want to protect their data anyway. But it did. The other 6 recommendations went through the General Assembly through the Global Digital Compact. So again, I'm fiercely proud of that. But Trump could come in and pull out of that now. So we don't know if that will get taken forward or not. We have yet to see. And these last few slides I will go through very quickly because this is just where we are now in terms of my biggest worry. I believe really AI could be profoundly for the good. And this is Azim Hazar wrote a brilliant piece in September saying why we need it. We really need it. We can do things with AI we couldn't possibly do. It's like the invention of the calculator. Right, we couldn't do all that maths, right? We can't do all the analysis of data. On Monday, I was at an AI for Science forum. We were tripping over Nobel laureates for science, right? DeepMind and the Royal Society got BAFTA full of really eminent scientists and Nobel laureates talking about the amazing things that AI is enabling to do as scientists. And, but the problem is, it's flawed technology. Generative AI hallucinates. It has to, by the way it's trained, makes things up. We've got all the copyright issues and the issues about how you train, how can you scale up, where do you get the data from? You've got the people are suing the companies for you can't use our data. Where are they going to try to get the data from? They also consume huge amounts of power in doing this. Please don't use ChatGPT for search. It takes orders of magnitude more power from the data centers than a simple Google search will do. But we're not told that enough, or a Bing search if you're using Bing. If you try and use synthetic data, which is what Google are trying to do, and others, I suppose, the models collapse very quickly. So that's not working. Will it help us code? That's another whole story. I'm going to finish with this. This is the piece. My worry is that we are filling the internet with incorrect information. And when Hinton and Demis Hassabis got their Nobel Prizes, do you know why there's no Nobel Prize for mathematics? Well, the answer's on the screen. When I was a pure mathematician, a mathematician doesn't matter, it was pure or not. When I was a mathematician at Southampton, they told us that the reason there was no Nobel Prize for mathematics was because Nobel's wife had an affair with a German mathematician. Yeah, right? Now, there's no evidence that that happened, but it's pretty certain that Nobel didn't like mathematics. He didn't, like my husband's a physicist, and he thinks maths is just a servant of the sciences, okay? He doesn't rate mathematics at all. Nobel was obviously very similar, and he decreed in the will there would not be a Nobel Prize for mathematics. As a result, there's not been a Nobel Prize for computer science, and mathematicians invented the Fields Medal, and computer science, we got the Turing Award for, and then, of course, the Nobel Prize, they did a really good thing, I think, marketing for them to get Hinton and Hassabis their Nobel Prizes for physics and chemistry. But look at that bottom one there. This is the AI overview from Google. When I searched this query, about Nobel and his wife, that Mariam Mirzakhani became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize in mathematics, even though it's just said there isn't a Nobel Prize in mathematics. She was the first woman to win a Fields Medal, which is often described as the Nobel Prize of Mathematics, which is why that went through. But my worry is that's just an example. Here's the paper I wrote with Dennis Hatibas in this journal. It's complete fake. The journal's fake, the paper's fake, and there's a lot of other papers in that so-called journal by famous AI people that are completely fake and generated by GPT. I think it was done, I haven't quite got to the bottom of it, as part of an experiment to test algorithms for detecting fake papers. But it's up on the web, right? So, I am finished now. This is my last slide for you. Can we stop the internet becoming a toxic swamp with just islands of accountability and authority? I'm going to stop now, right? I am. But that is my biggest worry at the moment. Sorry.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for a very wide-ranging, very interesting. I don't know if you're more worried after the lecture or before the lecture, but let's explore that maybe a little bit. So it's my pleasure, I'm Howard Tomlinson, the president of the Society of Wills, to throw this open for conversation.
Yeah, I'm sorry I overran. Can we do another 10 minutes for questions? That's all right, isn't it? I'm only stopping you get to the reception.
Who would like to go first?
Oh, you do it, sorry.
Could you introduce yourself when you ask the question?
I'm Rajesh Ran Singh. I work in Swansea University. Rajesh Ran Singh. I work in Swansea Uni. Firstly, thank for a very nice talk. Just one of your comments caught my attention, and I was just wondering your opinion on that. Sort of made a comment that the new US government might say all the guards off, go and win the race, rather than losing it to China. What's wrong with that philosophy?
Well, if they end up producing, if they're right about existential threats and they go ahead without any guardrails and produce the most super intelligent thing they can produce, do we want to, that could be the end of us. It could be the end of the human race, because it would wipe us out. And so, but even, I don't think we're near enough that yet for that to be an immediate worry. But my worry is that it's also the content of what if you allow anybody to do anything, remember what's happened with the internet and all the social media and the stuff. Suppose we took all the guardrails off social media now. How would you feel about that? There's not that many, but we do have the companies actually stopping, there's the child abuse, the pornography, getting to children, and the problems of terrorism and all the things we've asked the companies to deal with. Suppose in the AI world, all the guardrails come off and they're allowed to do what they like. Is that a world we want to be in? Is that because history shows us people will use it. And there's apart from the competition aspects that it would knock everybody else, and of course it would get China. There would be a superpower race. But it's more, to me, it's seeing the history of what's happened with an unregulated internet and thinking about how much worse it might be with unregulated AI.
So I have a question. It's Matt Jones of this parish.
I know Matt.
Yeah. So you put up a quote there from Matt Clifford saying that within 2 years, thousands of people will be killed by AI. I think one of the issues is that phrase AI hides a multitude of other technologies, and certainly, probably today, thousands of people were killed by AI. So drone attacks, guided missiles,
yeah,
it's all
okay.
machine learning,
yeah, you're
right?
guiding the
So I think again,
this
kind of existential threat that Sam Altman and others put out there It is, the most dangerous thing about it is it hides the current use of AI and machine learning, which is killing people
Potentially.
every day.
I have to say that in the UN report, we said that was outside scope because there are other agencies dealing with the use of AI in the military. And scientists have been, for a long time warning, AI scientists have been warning about this for a long time, that no AI should be allowed to make a decision to kill. And I wasn't thinking about that when I was doing, saying about what could AI kill? Could AI kill millions of people in the next 2 years? Because I don't think Matt Clifford was thinking about that when he made that comment. But it's a very fair comment to make, Matt, other Matt, and it's not one I want to duck. I don't know how much, by the way, the big internet companies are involved in selling AI to the military. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think that's where the military get their AI from, because I don't believe they would be relying on any of this generative AI. They'll be relying on more good old-fashioned AI, yeah? And so, that's the analysis we went through when we were doing the United Nations report. So, very good point to make there. Thanks, Matt.
Bertie Muller, Swansea University and AISB. You talked a lot about AI safety. Now, for many decades, we didn't have a definition of AI that was accepted. Now the OECD has given us one that's very broad.
It's all right.
Yeah. But do we know what AI safety entails?
No, of course we don't. And this is what my irritation was the way that Rishi Sunak went about it. He rapidly went down the AI safety rat hole without defining any of those things. And it is still, and was then, all about safety of foundation models, large language models, about the existential threat. Are these things going to rise up? And it was not a military one, right? It was about, are these things going to invent biochemical stuff? Are they going to invent new drugs that could do us harm? Are they going to rise up and beat us at everything, or all sorts of things? And so how do you test that? And at the moment, the AI Safety Institute does a lot of, they have benchmarks, and they basically test what Silicon Valley is producing through the Silicon Valley APIs, and test them against a set of benchmarks, and ask them questions to tease out what an answer to a test question about invention of a drug, or they've developed a set of questions to test whether these things are thinking for themselves. Now, many AI professors, and I'm not really an AI professor, right? I have never worked on neural nets, or I've used AI throughout my career, but I wouldn't call myself an AI research professor or a researcher, whichever way around it is. Many of the people who do know about this stuff will argue that generative AI is they're just probabilistic statistics machines. You probably can explain this better than I can. That come up with just like the prompts on our mobile phone, in a very clever way, the best next word, phrase, bit of an image, whatever, on existing knowledge, and also make mistakes a lot. So, but that. You could get around the last bit, but there is no evidence that they're going to produce anything that's going to do us in any near future time, the sort of harm that Matt Clifford and others were talking about, or the tech bros talk about. But actually, having said that, I think it was started for the wrong reason, but I do think now the AI Safety Institute in the UK could become a bit of a jewel in our crown if this government play it well. Because I believe, in their manifesto, and as Peter Kyle is carrying this on, I know they haven't always stuck with their manifesto things, but in their manifesto they said they would actually introduce a bill rather than just a white paper about AI regulation, and would put the AI Safety Institute on a statutory footing. And I think the AI Safety Institute could be given the responsibility for introducing guardrails for testing AI systems. And over time, I think that could be very, very useful if we steer it in the right sort of direction and get it. It's initially going to be about foundation models, but that could grow and evolve over time. So I think it could be a good thing. We're very interested to know what Trump does with the US Safety Institute. And there's only a handful of these growing up. And I think it could become actually a big research area as we go forward. So I'm quite positive about the way it might turn out. Does that help at all? Yeah. Come back at me if you want. You know more. But
Professor Saeed Ashraf, consultant heart surgeon, Morriston Hospital.
Hello.
15, 16 years ago, Professor Arasu mentioned to me about AI, that's the future. And I thought, oh, he's just saying that. But I was wrong, and he was, as usual, because he's an engineer, he's right. Now, medicine and AI. AI, we all know that is totally and 100% data-based. Data, correct data, revalidated data. And at present, in the whole world, NHS, we are lucky. NHS has got the biggest data in the world. Even America doesn't have, China doesn't have.
I get it, yeah.
Okay?
Get it.
Now that data...
We can't access it. If you're not inside the hospital, you can't get at it. But anyway, go on.
We can work on it. That's why. If you ask nicely, we'll always give
no,
you.
that doesn't work in Southampton. I'll come and ask you nicely. I can't get the Southampton people to share it with us.
But you won't believe, I can't access to my medical record. You know, we are so particular. So that's another thing that you can trust us blindly, okay? So AI, the data, revalidated data, has made a difference in our medicine.
Yes, absolutely, already. Yeah.
And to be honest, I must say, 10 years ago, whatever diagnosis was taking weeks and months, making it within a minute, is because of AI. I wouldn't go that far that how much safe it will be, particularly when it comes to surgery, okay? Robot is coming to our heart surgery, but again, all the data up till now have shown it is still a human being dependent, okay? So my question to you is that in medicine, I can say some data are revalidated, others are not. But when it comes to physics and chemistry or genetics, how much you're sure those data are correct and most trustworthy? Because we are going to base your AI on those data. Thank you.
Your question?
I enjoyed your talk.
I think this is all part and parcel of what we will, the sorts of new jobs that will evolve with AI. Data curation, quality control, quality assurance of data are going to be vital skills going forward, so that whoever can rely on the AI that's being used. And for most of what you're talking about is good old-fashioned AI at the moment. It's image processing in very narrow areas. It's the robots are amazing. I see some of it in Southampton and around, and you know, just amazing what they can do. It doesn't mean we're going to ever, not ever, but I can't say that ever, but it doesn't mean we don't need the doctors and the nurses. In fact, what I think will happen is that the AI will come in to enable, to do the high precision stuff, the you know, analysis of scans and much more quickly and very accurately, so that the medical professionals can have more time to actually do what they should be doing, which is looking after the patients and making sure that they get the treatment they need with that specialist support. And I mean, Tony Blair is making the case very hard that, in what I call the shadow government, is making the case very hard for, you know, the fast introduction of AI into the health service on the administrative side to help us reduce the waiting lists and make the hospitals more efficient. And I really hope he's right. And I've got, I don't know about you, I've got quite a lot of time for Wes Sweeting. He seems to know what he's doing, and because it can't be a huge rush. It's got to be very staged and managed and have good strategy. But I am hopeful that we could use the best of AI to really improve our health service and make it what we all want it to be.
So one more question. Interest of gender balance. I'm so glad you want to ask a question.
I will be the gender balance in the room. Hi, my name's Megan Van Witchley. I'm a researcher over in computer science, but I specifically look at computer science and social mobility.
Yeah.
And I was really interested when you were talking about disintermediation and diversity, that we know in the UK our computing education is not particularly diverse. We tend to get white middle class boys that are studying computing. And part of me is really concerned about, well, AI is coming in, how do we develop the skills in young people to kind of critically engage with AI and these kind of governance models of AI? And I know there's a lot in government talking about how do we get teachers to use AI, but there's less about AI as a digital skill. Is there kind of something that comes
I wish I
in
could give
there?
you a whole talk on that, because it's one of my passions, so I need to do it in a couple of... You're absolutely right. I was with people from DeepMind yesterday who were talking about, oh, we need lots of AI skills and we're going to make it an engineering science. And I thought, God, you're just perpetuating this monoculture. And they didn't realize they were doing it. They thought, no, this is very interdisciplinary. We're getting mathematicians and computer scientists. Oh, right. So, you know, it's the same. You don't... of course we need people with maths and computer science who go on to be AI coders, programmers, and we need diversity in that, absolutely. But we need diversity. AI is not... I really don't want AI to be thought of as a subset of computer science. We're just launching a master's in Southampton, which is... Actually, it might be an MA, which is very interesting. We're doing it through the social science faculty, and it's a master's or a master's of some sort in AI for non-science, non-STEM, so that there will be no maths prerequisite, and we will take students from any discipline. It's like we did with web science, only it's going to be online, and of course our partners in this online journey want a lot of people studying it to make the business model work, which I want too. And I'm really excited that this is finally happening, because I want to achieve what you're talking about. I could talk, I mean, are you going to the reception? I could talk a bit more, because the British Computer Society, they're launching a new programme to get in diversity again with the amazing Julia Adamson. Because, you know, I'll finish with this, right? I wrote my first paper about the lack of women in computing in 1987. And not a lot's changed since then, actually. The dial hasn't significantly changed. And I really don't want us to go down that same route with AI, because it's even more important that we don't with AI. I'll just leave it there.
Well, the last word to the gentleman.
Okay. Thank you.
I hope it isn't a hard question. Make it like the last one on question time.
I don't know, you'll have. Okay, Dmitry Finkelstein, Maths Department, Swansea. So my question probably is about the connection between two parts of the lectures. You mentioned about 4 types of internet.
It's a hard question. Go on. This is not an easy question to answer. I can feel it.
You mentioned about 4 types of internet, right? And obviously they have a bit different, speed of spreading across the world. About that part of the world which is not covered by internet, or which is just now covered by internet widely, right? Yeah. Obviously, I guess at least that the 5th type of internet, which you mentioned, like a parasitic one a bit, or a virus one, is the most fast in spreading, and they see this, or parts of it, everywhere in the part of the world where the first exist. For example, they saw this in the referendum, then people believe in some unproved facts, just following the freedom of speech, but they were widely populated by the old-fashioned media, newspapers and so on, and next day after referendum, these newspapers said quite opposite to what they said before. They saw this now in the election in the US, there, instead of old-fashioned media, now we have TikTok and so on, and millions of people believe in the unproven information.
Get to a question.
Spread there. My question is the following. You mentioned about the safety of AI and measures to be safe on the AI. Obviously, there will be the process from, say, 2 parts or several parts of the world, and there will be kind of competition between different countries or vision of the peaceful world, right? And they will use
What's your question?
technology. The question is the following. Do you think that it's safe to put restrictions of the using of AI, getting that the opposite, say, party will use AI against you without this restriction, following another rules of internet, following another principles of development? So
Right.
shall we?
Show of hands,
related
okay?
to that question
Look,
about
show
the
of
using
hands.
drones.
Is the answer yes or no? Who wants to answer yes? Who wants to answer no? Can you ask, really, what is it? I couldn't get your question. I can't understand what you, I think it's a long answer, but anyway, please try again. Make it more concise, because we're trying to get to the reception. Go on.
Okay.
No, try again. What is it? Something about...
My question is,
is it
is it not the
democratic
case
elections?
when imposing the rules for AI, very strict rules, in the, okay, let's use this, democratic world,
Yeah.
they may face the fact that non-democratic world, sorry for very brutal
Yeah,
word,
yeah, yeah,
non-democratic world will not follow these rules and
Well,
will
because they
have
don't
much
have any
more
elections.
powerful AI,
Yeah.
roughly speaking.
Yeah.
Okay?
So you're going to... So what... Yeah. Yeah, so
This,
they won't.
this is the question. Shall these rules imposed on the AI be more flexible, be more... very simple example mentioned here about that the AI can decide whether to kill or not being used in drones.
Yeah.
Right? As you may know, now they starting to be used in drones quite widely, say in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. In the opposite side, it will be used. Right? So now we put the rule, we do not use this, it sounds for good, but from the opposite side, it will be used. So what shall we do? So how to build this, how to guarantee the progress of AI, right? Getting that not everyone will be following the rules, protocols, policies.
Well, oh, fuck, that is a long answer. This is not an easy answer. I think that if you're trying to protect democracy, watch my Beth Rigby interview on Sky News, which is on YouTube, where I talked about this a lot. I do think this is what I was saying when Rishi Sunak was going down the safety, non-existential threat route or the existential threat route. I was more worried about the threat on deep fakes and fake news on democratic elections and the sorts of stuff that the authoritarian Russians and other will pour into the elections to try and persuade us to vote one way or the other. There's a lot of cybersecurity stuff in the answer. It's not just down to looking at the content. You've got to try and see where things are coming from. So there's cybersecurity issues in there as well. So it's quite a difficult thing to answer. But for sure, no, I think we can do it. I think my answer to the question is we can do it. We can put in the guardrails in such a way that it protects us both from internal threats and external threats. Okay?
Thank you so much for taking all these questions. Really appreciate it.
Some were harder than others. I like the lady's question in the front there. Can I stick with that one? Yours was much harder to answer. Good one, but harder. Right, go on.
So it's my great pleasure to now present the actual Sienkiewicz Medal to Dame Wendy Hall.
Thank you.
Let's make sure the photographer catches this
You have to come
wonderful
here.
moment.
Thank you. Come on, I'm used to this. Come on.
So much. Super.
I don't mean this. I mean, I'm used to photos. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
The switch
Do you mind if I sit down while you do that? No. Need a rest. I did quite well, standing up.
So it's for me to close proceedings and say a big thank you to Wendy for a very interesting presentation and fronting the very challenging questions which you got. I also would like to mention, very interesting to hear about your MA in Southampton, and Matt tapped me on the shoulder and said, please do mention that Swansea runs a CDT, which has got non-scientists in computer science doing work there. So a big thank you to you, and as part of our appreciation, there's a
I've got to stand up again, haven't I? Yeah. Ooh. Thank you. You want a photo of this or not? But I don't know. Thank you very. Yeah. Come on, photo, right. That's it. Where? No, it hasn't.
It's
Fake
up.
news.
Yeah. So,
What do you get from in a Welsh hamper?
well, we can find out afterwards. Cheese and whiskey, yeah, that's what we get for Christmas. So,
it? Do you make whiskey in Wales?
Penderyn,
Yeah?
in Swansea.
Oh.
Best whiskey in the world.
Does that... Can I have a glass tonight, then?
So, big thank you naturally also to Professor Helen Griffiths for introducing the speaker, to Howell Thomas for fronting the Q&A session. I need to mention the sponsors again. So it's the Turing Institute, IACM, International Association of Computation Mechanics, and UK.
I was president of that, do you know? The ACM.
So thank you for sponsoring us, for providing advertising support. And as already mentioned by Eraso, we've got SWEET, South Wales Institute of Engineers Educational Trust, and Howell from the Learned Society of Wales, which have contributed financially to this evening. Big thank you also to the IT and AV teams. Without this, it wouldn't have worked. The university events team, I'm nearly done, and naturally a big thank you to Rasu and to Sam, without whom we wouldn't have had this evening at all, and no Sienkiewicz lecture theory. So big thank you. And that's it from me, other than snacks and drinks are upstairs. Upstairs reception. Thank you very much for joining. It was a very interesting evening.